I never thought I'd see $2.1 billion worth of servers crash before my eyes. But when my boss stole the cybersecurity code I spent 18 months creating, I had to make a choice. Hit subscribe and like now to see how I stood up to my boss and changed my life forever. The day I discovered my boss had stolen my code was unusually warm for March in Seattle. I remember because I was wearing a light sweater instead of my usual winter coat, the first time that year. I'm Victoria Reynolds, and until 6 months ago, I was the lead security architect at Quantum Shield Technologies. I joined QST fresh out of MIT with my master's in cybersecurity. 5 years in, at 29, I had worked my way up from junior developer to leading a team of 14 brilliant engineers. We were developing what would eventually become Sentinel, a revolutionary zero-day vulnerability detection system that could identify and patch security holes before they could be exploited. Sentinel was my baby. I'd conceptualized it during a sleepless weekend after a particularly nasty ransomware attack hit one of our major healthcare clients. The idea came to me while I was staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. What if we could create an AI system that could think like hackers but work faster than them? The next morning, I drafted a proposal and took it straight to my boss, Daniel Harrington. "This is ambitious, Victoria," he'd said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled as always. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." For 18 months, my team and I worked ridiculous hours. We built, tested, failed, rebuilt, and gradually created something extraordinary. The core algorithm, the part that made Sentinel revolutionary, I coded myself during a 2-week coding marathon fueled by cold brew coffee and takeout. I called it the Nexus Protocol. That morning in March, I was reviewing some code commits when I noticed something strange in our repository. A duplicate branch of the Nexus Protocol had been created, but with subtle modifications to the attribution headers. My name had been removed. "Hey, Raj," I called over to our DevOps lead. "Did you make changes to the Nexus main branch last night?" He shook his head. "Wasn't me. Check the commit history." I did. What I found made my stomach drop. The changes had been committed at 2:13 a.m. from Daniel's company account. I pulled up the modified files and scanned through them. My breath caught in my throat. He hadn't just removed my name. He'd added his own as the primary architect. Every algorithm, every ingenious solution I'd developed over countless sleepless nights, now listed Daniel Harrington as the creator. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, loud enough that Alex, our junior developer, glanced over with concern. I dug deeper. There were other changes too, subtle modifications to the documentation, backdating certain development milestones to times when Daniel would have been involved. He was systematically erasing my contribution and positioning himself as the mastermind behind Sentinel. I immediately went to HR but hit my first roadblock. Jennifer Davis, the HR director, listened sympathetically, but ultimately said, "Victoria, I understand your concern, but all code developed here is company property. The attribution in internal documentation isn't necessarily a legal issue. It's not about legality, Jennifer. It's about ethics. He's taking credit for my work." She promised to look into it, but warned me not to escalate unnecessarily. Translation: don't make waves. That night, I couldn't sleep. Our company was in final negotiations with Cerberus Global, a multinational security consortium that wanted to license Sentinel. The deal was rumored to be worth over $2 billion. If it went through with Daniel positioned as the creator, he would almost certainly receive the multi-million-dollar bonus that should have been mine. The next morning, I confronted him directly in his glass-walled office overlooking Puget Sound. "Why did you change the attribution on the Nexus protocol?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Daniel barely looked up from his monitor. "I made some significant improvements to the efficiency algorithms, just bringing the documentation in line with reality." "That's not true and you know it. I wrote that code, every line of it." He finally met my eyes, his expression cold. "Victoria, you're a valued team member, but Sentinel is a company project. I've guided its development from conception." "That's a lie," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. Sentinel was my idea, my design, my code. I think you're overworked, he replied smoothly. Maybe you should take a few days off. Clear your head. I realized then that he'd been planning this for months. The occasional meetings he'd insisted I skip to focus on coding. The times he'd presented our progress to the board without me. He'd been positioning himself as the visionary while relegating me to just another coder. I left his office and went straight to my desk. With shaking hands, I pulled up the original Sentinel proposal I'd emailed him last year, the documentation of our early planning sessions, the commit logs showing my contributions. I compiled everything into a folder and sent it to my personal email, probably breaking company policy. But at that point, I didn't care. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I checked Daniel's calendar. He had a meeting with Cerberus Global the next day, a final demo before signing. The entire system would be running on the development servers, showcasing Sentinel's capabilities in real time. Those servers were authenticated using key pairs. And the master access key? I had created it. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment, weighing my options, the Seattle skyline twinkling through my window like it was mocking me. By morning, I had made my decision. When I arrived at work, I went through the motions, nodding at colleagues, responding to emails. At lunch, when the office was half empty, I executed my plan. It took less than 5 minutes to revoke the master access key and replace it with a new one that only I possessed. I didn't stick around for the fallout. I cleaned out my desk, dropped my resignation letter on Jennifer's desk, and walked out of Quantum Shield Technologies for the last time. What I didn't realize was that I had just lit the fuse on something much bigger than I could have imagined. The first call came at 3:42 p.m. while I was sitting in a coffee shop 6 blocks from the office, trying to process what I'd done. Daniel. I declined it. Then another, and another. By the 5th call, I turned my phone off completely. When I finally turned it back on that evening, I had 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 39 emails. Most were from Daniel and Jennifer, but there were also messages from confused team members. One text from Raj stood out. "What did you do? The entire system crashed during the Cerberus demo. Daniel is losing his mind." I hadn't intended to crash the system. I'd only wanted to lock Daniel out until he admitted what he'd done. But I'd underestimated how deeply integrated the access key was. Without it, apparently, the entire Sentinel system had collapsed. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel, his face flushed with anger. "I know you're in there, Victoria," he shouted. "Open this door or I'll call the police." I stepped back, heart racing. How had he found my address? Then I remembered. The company had it on file. I had never considered how quickly this would escalate. "What do you want?" I called through the door. "You know exactly what I want. The access key. You deliberately sabotaged the biggest deal in company history." "You stole my work," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "You were going to take credit for everything I built." "That's ridiculous. Open this door so we can discuss this like adults." "I'm recording this conversation," I lied. "Admit you stole my code and I'll give you the new access key." There was a long pause. "This is absurd. I'll see you in court." His footsteps receded down the hallway. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Ms. Reynolds, this is Mark Winters, QST's legal counsel. I'm calling to inform you that the company is preparing to file a lawsuit against you for intellectual property theft, sabotage, and violation of your non-disclosure agreement." My stomach dropped. I didn't steal anything. Daniel Harrington stole my work and was planning to take credit for it. That's not how the company sees it. All code you developed as an employee belongs to QST. But what you did yesterday caused the company to lose a $2.1 billion deal and took 458 servers offline. 458? I repeated, stunned. I had no idea the system had scaled to that many servers. "The company is willing to discuss dropping the lawsuit if you immediately provide the new access key and sign a statement admitting to your actions." And if I don't? Then we'll pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. Ms. Reynolds, you're looking at potential criminal charges, not just civil penalties. After he hung up, I sat on my couch, trying to think clearly through waves of panic. I needed help, legal help, and I needed it fast. I called Mia Chen, a college friend who had gone into technology law. She agreed to meet me for lunch. "This is serious, Vic," Mia said after I explained everything. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a restaurant in Capitol Hill. "But you're not without options. Did you document your work process?" "Obsessively," I nodded. "I have emails, design documents, commit logs, everything." "That's good. And the modification to the attribution? You have proof of that too?" I nodded again. "Here's what we're going to do," she said, leaning forward. "First, we're not giving them the key yet. That's our leverage. Second, we're filing a whistleblower complaint about the intellectual property theft. Third, we need to get your story out before they control the narrative." "Get my story out?" "How?" "I know a tech journalist at The Verge who would love this story. Corporate theft, David versus Goliath, billions at stake. But we need to move fast." That afternoon, Mia and I met with Sophia Lin, the journalist. She listened intently, taking notes as I walked her through everything. "I can have this ready to publish tomorrow morning," Sophia said, "but I'll need to reach out to QST for comment today. Are you prepared for their response?" "Do it," I said, with more confidence than I felt. That evening, I received another call from Mark Winters. His tone had changed dramatically. "Ms. Reynolds, the company would like to discuss a potential resolution to our dispute." "I'm listening," I said, trying to sound calm. "CEO Thomas Barrett would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Just you and him. No lawyers." I glanced at Mia, who was sitting across from me. She shook her head emphatically. "I'll be bringing my legal counsel," I said firmly. A pause. "Fine. 10 a.m. at the Four Seasons downtown." After I hung up, Mia looked concerned. "They know about the article. They're trying to shut this down before it goes public. Is that good or bad for us?" "Could be either. But remember, the access key is your leverage. Don't give it up without getting what you want in writing." That night, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my head, imagining what Thomas Barrett might say, how I should respond. By morning, I was exhausted, but resolute. The Four Seasons lobby was all marble and subtle luxury. Thomas Barrett was already waiting when Mia and I arrived, along with Mark Winters. Barrett was in his 60s, with steel gray hair and the confident posture of someone used to getting his way. "Ms. Reynolds?" he said, extending his hand. "I appreciate you coming." We moved to a private meeting room where coffee and pastries had been arranged. No one touched them. "Let me be direct," Barrett began. "This situation has become unnecessarily complicated. Daniel Harrington has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into your allegations." That surprised me. I hadn't expected them to act against Daniel so quickly. "We've reviewed the commit logs and documentation," he continued. "While we don't necessarily agree with your characterization of events, we acknowledge that your contribution to Sentinel was significant." "Victoria created Sentinel," Mia interjected. "Every aspect of it, Mr. B." Harrington attempted to take credit for her work to secure a personal bonus. Barrett's expression tightened slightly. "As I said, we're investigating that. But the immediate issue is the revoked access key. Cerberus Global has given us 48 hours to demonstrate a functioning system, or they walk away permanently." "And what are you offering Victoria in return for her help?" Mia asked. "Full recognition as the primary architect of Sentinel, a formal apology from the company, and compensation for any distress caused." "And the bonus that would have gone to Daniel if the deal had closed?" I asked. Barrett hesitated. "We can discuss appropriate compensation." "No," I said firmly. "I want the same bonus Daniel would have received, in writing. And I want a public statement acknowledging that I created Sentinel." The negotiations lasted 3 more hours. By the end, we had a detailed agreement. I would provide the new access key in exchange for full credit as Sentinel's creator, a $3.5 million bonus, the amount Daniel would have received, and a public statement from QST acknowledging my role. As we left the hotel, Mia squeezed my arm. "You did it, Vic. You stood your ground." But I knew it wasn't over yet. The real test would be whether QST would honor our agreement once they had the key. The next morning, I arrived at Quantum Shield Technologies with a mixture of dread and determination. The security guard at the front desk looked surprised to see me but waved me through after checking his computer. The office felt eerily familiar yet strange, like returning to your elementary school as an adult. My former team members gave me uncertain smiles and questioning looks as I walked to the conference room where I was scheduled to meet with the technical team. Raj was there, along with 3 senior engineers and Thomas Barrett. Daniel was noticeably absent. "Victoria," Barrett nodded. "Thank you for coming in." I connected my laptop to the projector. "Before I provide the new access key, I want confirmation that the agreement we signed yesterday is being honored." Barrett slid a folder across the table. Inside was a press release, ready to go out, crediting me as the primary architect and creator of Sentinel. "We'll issue this as soon as the system is back online," he said. "The bonus payment has already been processed." I nodded and began typing. On the screen, I walked them through the changes I'd made to the authentication system. "I didn't actually break anything," I explained. "I just changed where the system looks for authentication. All your data and code is intact." Raj looked relieved. "So we can restore everything quickly?" "Yes. I'll provide the new key and show you how to implement it properly." It took about 2 hours to fully restore the system. We ran several tests, and by early afternoon, all 458 servers were back online. "The Cerberus team is standing by for a remote demo," Barrett said. "They've agreed to proceed if today's demonstration is successful." I hadn't expected to be part of the demo, but Barrett insisted. "You created this system. You should present it." The demonstration went flawlessly. Sentinel detected and patched 17 vulnerabilities in Cerberus's test environment in under 3 minutes. The Cerberus CTO was visibly impressed. "We'll have contracts ready by tomorrow," he said before signing off. As we left the conference room, Barrett touched my arm lightly. "Victoria, can we speak privately?" In his office, he seemed less the imposing CEO and more like a tired older man. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have paid closer attention to what was happening with Sentinel. Daniel had always been trustworthy, or so I thought." "What will happen to him?" I asked, surprised by my own curiosity. "He's been terminated, and he'll likely never work in this industry again once this becomes public." I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and pity. Daniel had tried to steal my work, but his 20-year career was now in ruins. "What about you, Victoria? Your position is still open. The team respects you. We could really use you to lead Sentinel's ongoing development." The offer was tempting. I loved my team and the work we'd done, but something had broken in my relationship with QST, a trust that couldn't easily be repaired. "I appreciate the offer, but I think it's best if I move on." Barrett nodded, looking unsurprised. "I thought you might say that. If you change your mind, the door is open." He handed me an envelope. "Your bonus, as agreed. You've earned it." As I left the building, clutching the envelope containing confirmation of the wire transfer, I felt strangely empty. I had won, technically. I had my recognition, my money, my vindication. But I'd also lost my team, my project, and in some ways, my direction. I stopped at the coffee shop where I'd hidden out after revoking the access key. As I sat with my latte, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia Lynn. "Story is live. Congrats. What's next for you?" Good question. What was next? I opened my laptop and began to type. Not code this time, but ideas. If I could build Sentinel, I could build something even better. Something that was truly mine from the start. By the time I finished my coffee, I had the outline of a new security system, one that would make Sentinel look like a prototype. And I knew exactly what I was going to call my new company, Revoked Security. 6 months after the QST incident, as tech media had taken to calling it, I was standing in the small office space I'd leased in downtown Seattle, surrounded by whiteboards covered in diagrams and code snippets. Revoked Security was real, with seed funding, 5 employees, and our first product nearly ready for beta testing. The press release about my role in creating Sentinel had indeed gone out as promised, followed quickly by Sophia's detailed article. The story had exploded across tech media. For about 3 weeks, I couldn't open any industry website without seeing my name. The narrative had quickly formed. Brilliant young engineer stands up to corporate theft, reclaims her rightful credit. What the headlines didn't capture was how disorienting those weeks had been. I received job offers from Google, Microsoft, and a dozen startups. Venture capitalists wanted to meet for coffee. Former colleagues reached out with congratulations, or in some cases, resentment. Daniel Harrington had disappeared from public view. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to Arizona to live with family. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh, if there had been a way to handle things without destroying his career. But then I'd remember those modified attribution headers, the systematic way he'd tried to erase my contribution, and my resolve would harden again. The Cerberus deal had gone through, ultimately valued at $2.3 billion, even more than initially reported. QST's stock had jumped 22% on the news. I occasionally checked my equity that had vested before I left, now worth considerably more than when I'd walked out. Mia had become not just my lawyer, but a close friend and advisor. She'd helped me navigate the legalities of starting Revoked Security, making sure I didn't violate any non-competes or use any proprietary code from my QST days. Victoria? Eliza, my lead developer, stuck her head into my office. The investors are here. I smoothed my blazer and took a deep breath. Today was huge, our first major funding pitch to a group of serious venture capitalists. The meeting went well, with thoughtful questions about our technology and go-to-market strategy. Our product, Phoenix, was a security system that built on the concepts I'd developed with Sentinel but took them further. Where Sentinel was reactive, Phoenix was predictive. It didn't just find vulnerabilities, it anticipated them before they even emerged. As the investors were leaving, one of them, Janet Wu from Horizon Ventures, lingered behind. "That was impressive," she said. "But I have one question that's not about the technology." "Go ahead," I said, curious. "The QST situation. Would you handle it the same way if you could do it over?" I considered the question carefully. Mostly yes. I would still stand up for my work. I would still insist on recognition. But I might have found a way to do it without taking 458 servers offline. I smiled slightly. That was excessive, even if it worked. She laughed. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. This industry needs more people willing to stand their ground." She handed me her card. "Call me tomorrow. I think Horizon wants to lead your round." After she left, I stood alone in our conference room, thinking about how much had changed in 6 months. I had gone from employee to founder, from having my work stolen to creating something entirely new. My phone buzzed with a news alert. QST had just announced a new cybersecurity acquisition, a small firm specializing in blockchain security. The quote from Thomas Barrett mentioned integrating their technology with Sentinel, the groundbreaking system developed by former QST architect Victoria Reynolds. I smiled at that. At least they were still honoring our agreement. Later that evening, as I was working late, I received an unexpected email. The sender, Daniel Harrington. "Victoria," it began, "I've started and deleted this email a dozen times over the past months. There's probably nothing I can say that would matter to you, but I need to try anyway. What I did was wrong. Inexcusable. I convinced myself that as the team leader, I deserved credit for the vision, even if you wrote the code. But that was a lie I told myself to justify theft. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of becoming irrelevant in an industry that worships youth and innovation. Afraid that your brilliance would overshadow everything I'd built over 20 years. That fear led me to betray, not just you, but myself and everything I claimed to stand for. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still angry, but another part recognized the courage it took to send that email. Finally, I typed a brief reply. Daniel, thank you for your email. I appreciate your honesty. I hope you find your way forward. Victoria. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I didn't reject his apology either. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, but maybe they didn't need to be burned to the ground either. The next morning, Janet called as promised. Horizon wanted to lead our funding round, $8 million at a $30 million valuation, more than we had hoped for. As I shared the news with my small team, watching their excited faces, I realized something important. What had happened at QST had been painful, but necessary. It had forced me to stand up for myself in a way I might never have otherwise. It had pushed me to create something truly mine. The code Daniel had tried to steal was worth $2.1 billion to QST. But what I had gained from the experience, confidence, clarity, purpose, was worth far more than that to me. That evening, I updated the company values document we'd been drafting. At the top, I added a new core principle: own your work, honor others, never compromise on either. It seemed like a good foundation to build on.